Welcome to the Migrant Education Program Overview for the 2020 English Learner Coordinators Meeting, presented by Julie Chi and Noemi Trevino. Of the 10 Minnesota equity commitments, this session focuses on prioritizing equity and giving students options. The goals of today's session include understanding the basics of the Migrant Education Program, or MEP, understanding the plight of migratory students in the U.S., and establishing opportunities for you to advocate for migratory children and families. At the end of our session, we will provide you resources to support your understanding and ability to advocate. People unfamiliar with the migrant lifestyle in the U.S. often confuse the terms immigrant and migrant. And recently, media representations of migrant people are those who have entered the U.S. without documentation and have been separated from family members. However, this presentation focuses on people with a migratory lifestyle. While they may fit into the category of immigrant or refugee, migratory children and families are not necessarily either of these. For the purposes of our presentation, we will focus on their migratory lifestyle. To clarify, immigrants are individuals who come from a foreign country to live permanently somewhere in the U.S. Migrant farm workers are defined as individuals who must be absent from a permanent place of residence, most often in the U.S., for the purpose of seeking employment in agricultural work in another state or district boundary in the U.S. Migratory children move to Minnesota annually in the spring or summer, as or with a parent, to seek agricultural work for economic necessity. A qualifying move must happen within the preceding 36 months. To be eligible for Migrant Education Program services, they must be ages 0 to 21 and must not have graduated from high school. Districts have responsibilities to meet the needs of eligible migratory children when they enroll in school. Migratory children are verified with a Certificate of Eligibility, or COE.
The Migrant Education Program. How did it start? Well, President Johnson called for a congressional approval of large-scale federal aid for the elementary and secondary education. He also had ambitious new medical programs for the elderly, called Medicare, and for low-income people called Medicaid, and more funding for his war on poverty. In 1966, Congress enacted the Migrant Education Program as a state-administered and operated program to reduce the effects of the unique challenges that children of migratory agricultural workers experience, such as high levels of mobility, cultural and language barriers, social and community isolation, health-related problems, and highly disadvantaged due to socioeconomic backgrounds. So Title I, Part C, or Section 1302 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as amended and authorized, states to establish or improve directly or through local operating agencies programs of education for migratory children. The Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, was signed into law on December 10, 2015, and fully implemented on July 1st of 2017. So the authorizing statute for the Migrant Education Program is a formula grant provided to state education agencies to improve educational opportunities for migratory children so that they can succeed in regular school programs and meet challenging state academic content and student achievement standards, and ultimately graduate from high school. The Migrant Education Program allows funds to be used in a broad array of instructional and support services, educational or educationally related activities should address the unique needs that migratory children experience resulting from their migratory lifestyle. For example, the lack of continuity in education results in gaps in their learning. Insufficient credit accrual for on-time graduation. Cultural and language barriers that families encounter because of their high mobility. Health issues impacting academic performance. There's also a sense or lack of belonging when they're always uprooting and relocating. And obviously, the loss of instructional time. So states are encouraged and should be innovative when providing high-quality services to migratory children. Typical migration patterns. Historically speaking, migratory families come to Minnesota in the late spring or early summer, following migration patterns from their hometowns in Texas along the Rio Grande Valley. Many come from Brownsville, Donna, Sullivan City, Mission, Weslaco, Eagle Pass, Crystal City, Uvalde. Some families are even staying in Minnesota this year due to fear of contracting COVID-19. However, we know that some families are still choosing to return home to be closer to their relatives and their social network. Migration patterns. Historically speaking, migratory families typically arrive in Minnesota in the late spring or early summer, following migration patterns from their hometowns in South Texas along the Rio Grande Valley. Many come from Brownsville, Donna, Sullivan City, Mission, Weslaco, Eagle Pass, Crystal City, and Uvalde. Some families are even staying in Minnesota this year due to the fear of contracting COVID-19. However, we know that some families are choosing to return home to be closer to their relatives and their social networks. The three critical components of the MEP. We know that the Migrant Education Program is built on three pillars. Identification and recruitment is essential to the existence of the program. Eligibility determinations are critical to provide the supplemental services that migratory children are eligible to receive, such as free meals, health-related services, and other unique educational services. Services range from supplemental services of referrals to legal, health, employment, housing, and food shelves. We know that students need their records transferred, as it is a critical piece to ensure that migratory students receive credit for work completed and are appropriately placed in the next school that they enroll in. The symbolism of the migrant logo. The Migrant Education Program logo was introduced to us in 1974 at the National Migrant Education Conference. It was designed to include symbols for the migrant students' life and education. The logo helped give continuity to the program from school to school and from state to state. It helps migratory families recognize their program wherever they go. Look at the lower half of the circle. The lines arrayed from the center are like the rows of a field of crops. They also symbolize the partially opened pages of a book. The education of migrant children takes place both in the green fields where they and their families work and in the books and classrooms of their academic schooling. Just as laboring on the farm produces a harvest of crops, the effort required to do schoolwork produces a harvest of knowledge. Above the lines symbolizing rows of crops are the lines of the book of a plain blank horizon, or a future of wide open possibilities. The yellow upper circle of the design represents both the hot sun of the fields and the bright light of hope, knowledge, and success that awaits the student who pursues use in education. Notice the logo and the rows in the field also serve as pages in a book, and the horizon is the spine of the book, but the message is that learning takes place inside and outside of the classroom walls. Migrant students may generate funds from multiple sources, just as any other student may, each with its own eligibility criteria. Thus, migrant education dollars are not the only available funds to support migratory students. However, these funds are strictly dedicated to eligible migrant students, as these are supplementary funds. Each funding source has its own eligibility criteria. However, migratory students may generate funds from multiple sources, such as Title I Part A, McKinney-Vento, Gifted and Talented, Special Education, General Education, Neglected or Delinquent, and/or EL funds. I encourage you to leverage multiple funding sources to supplement the educational experience of the migratory students in your school. MEP funding. Federal funds are allocated to states by formula, and the funds may be used for multiple purposes. General administration of the state migrant education program, and for administrative services that are unique to the migrant education program, such as identification and recruitment statewide, record transfers, and inter- and interstate coordination, as well as the delivery of services to migratory children through subgrants and contracts. The Federal Office of Migrant Education provides states migrant education dollars so that they can identify and recruit eligible migratory children into the program. Children most in need of program services are often those who are the most difficult to find. In order to determine eligibility, recruiters conduct face-to-face interviews and are required to use the National Certificate of Eligibility, or COE, to document the eligibility of the migratory child and family. For more information and access to identification and recruitment resources, go to results.ed.gov.
As the data show in this chart, the number of students identified as migratory in Minnesota has decreased gradually since 2007 from 3,118 to 1,173. Not surprisingly, the number of students served by the migrant education program has also generally decreased from 1,718 to 384. Much of this decrease is due to closure of factories and reduced availability of work in certain regions of Minnesota, especially in the north. However, we know that migratory families do still come to Minnesota annually, and we realize that we may not be identifying all families who do come. We also recognize the fears that many families face in the recent political environment, which causes them to resist identification. This is why it is so important for district staff to understand the migratory lifestyle and how families are identified. You can support identification and ensure students receive the services they need and are entitled to receive. Due to the additional challenges of the pandemic, again, fewer students were identified as migratory this year than last year. However, increased efforts were made to serve students in areas outside the state's summer migrant education programs, and more families were actually served this year than last year. Advocacy has been key to the increase in services. Note that this data for 2020 is still preliminary.
Understanding the plight of the migratory student. Please take 5 minutes to pause this recording and watch the video, Fingers to the Bone, linked here. We recommend that you right-click and open the video in another tab. Return to our recording when finished for more information. We hope that this video gives you a glimpse of the plight that the migratory student experiences. Migratory students may experience higher levels of trauma due to mobility and often experience interrupted education, food scarcity, uprooting and relocating, which requires building new relationships and connecting with new resources. Children may experience post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from frequent and extended separation from family members. Migratory families are more likely to be uninsured or underinsured and are less likely to seek health services. Despite their greater exposure to traumatic experiences, migratory children are less likely to access medical and mental health services. On the flip side, they also demonstrate resilience because they've had to adapt to their surroundings and new environment. Migratory families are directly impacted and live with the effects of poverty, such as limited access to nutritious foods, exposure to substandard and crowded housing, limited access to reliable internet services and devices for hybrid instruction of their children, limited access to affordable health care, being over or under immunized, which can be very dangerous, being paid very low wages, and not being prepared with the appropriate clothing for the variable weather conditions they experience here in Minnesota. If a family member experiences COVID-19, they have limited quarantine spaces. These are just a few examples of living with and navigating poverty. These young girls reflect the harvest of hope and are the image of the future. We need to ensure that they receive every opportunity to succeed against all obstacles they may encounter. This is where EL and migrant education can partner in eliminating barriers for migratory children and families. These are examples of why advocacy is critical to migratory students' educational continuity. Migratory students experience high mobility as they or their families move frequently to follow the crop rotation, and often provide short notice, if any, when they move from one state to another. Timely and accurate educational and health information is not always available at the time that the student enrolls in their new school. And as a result, placement errors occur frequently, and secondary students are placed in incorrect courses or grades are not transferred in a timely manner. This is often discouraging and can result in dropouts. It is important that migratory eligibility is not only reported to new districts, but that students receive all the benefits that they are eligible for, such as free meals. You play an important role in making sure that the educational continuity of migratory students happens by collecting data and advocating for them when they are in your school.
Therefore, it is critical that every district designate a migrant liaison and enter and annually update the liaison's contact information into the MDE-org website as shown here. The Migrant Liaison supports the identification of migratory students and families and ensures that they receive the services they are eligible for once identified. Once the Migrant Liaison has been designated, that individual must receive training from Tri-Valley Opportunity Council to be certified to determine eligibility.
When eligible migratory students move from one district to another, it is critical that their information move with them to ensure continuity of educational and support services. Student data needs to follow them so that they are not penalized for such moves. We need to ensure that they receive credit for coursework that they've completed in our districts and that their health and records of support services, such as EL status and assessment results, move with them to reduce duplication and to ensure that they are not over or under immunized or unnecessarily rescreened for EL eligibility, for example. For this reason, the Migrant Liaison must have access to certain databases. The Migrant Student Information Exchange, or M6, is a national records exchange database, which allows state education agencies to upload required minimum data elements from our own existing state student record system into a single data repository where information on each migratory child is maintained, organized, and compiled in order to facilitate school enrollment, grade and course placement, credit accrual, and participation of migratory children in the migrant education program. In Minnesota, we use the Migrant Information System, or MIS 2000, as our state migratory student records system. Tri-Valley Opportunity Council provides migrant liaisons trainings on the use of M6 and MIS 2000 data systems in order to assist schools in facilitating enrollment and accurate course placement of migratory students. The U.S. Department of Education implemented M6, a web-based repository containing demographic, enrollment, placement, and credit accrual data in order to facilitate the national exchange of educational information about migratory children among the states. The district's individual official with authority, or Iowa, must authorize a district representative, such as the migrant liaison, the EL coordinator, a social worker, or other personnel, to create an idiom account in order to access the Migrant Identified Student Secured Report. Supporting students is a community effort. School is often the first places, and sometimes the only place, that migratory students and families connect with the local community. Community services for migratory students often focus on only meeting the basic needs, such as food and shelter. We need more staff and community members who speak the family's language to help navigate the educational system and understand the district's expectations. We can ask families directly, how can we help you help your kids? Such staff also can promote culturally diverse services and ensure families have access to local resources and can fully participate in school and community at large. As our late Senator Paul Wellstone once said, we all do better when we all do better. So how can we partner to better serve our shared migrant families? Well, we need to communicate frequently. We need to make referrals to each other's organizations and programs, to be knowledgeable about available services across service providers, both within the school building and out in the community. And that begins by building trusting relationships and following through. By coordinating with other programs, we can ensure that the needs of migratory children are met through a variety of sources in a way that leverages other program funds and optimizes the use of MEP funds for the unique needs of migratory children.
Now we would like to share with you some resources available in the community and at MDE. The Consulate of Mexico in St. Paul is a great resource to access for multiple purposes, such as documentation, for example, passports, consular registry, consular ID cards, voting cards, military service, civil registry, birth registry, and birth certificate, marriage registry and certificate, death registry and certificate, notary, powers of attorney, wills, and visas. They also have 20 programs mainly in areas of health, education, and financial literacy here and in Mexico. The Making Connections workshop will give you a brief overview of the Migrant Education Program. During this training, participants will have the opportunity to meet members of the Migrant Education Program team and discuss collaboration efforts and ways to help remove barriers for highly mobile families. Participants will learn about expectations of the Migrant Liaison, tools and resources available for school districts, reporting requirements, and learn how to advocate for migratory students. To register, please go to the link on this site and RSVP by December 6th, 2020. For more information, please contact Christine Young at the email address on this slide. Follow these steps to the different resources available on the Tri-Valley Opportunity Council webpage, such as how identification happens, making recruitment or training requests, and becoming certified to complete COEs. Their contact information is available at the bottom of this website. The Midwest Migrant Education Resource Center, or MERC, at Hamline University is a free lending library that supports all kids kindergarten through 12 who are identified as migrant. You can order any of the resources they have available to them as long as you have at least one migratory student enrolled in your class. So they have a lot of resources ranging from themed units in a box to Lego robotics kits and bilingual books and more. So please do take advantage of their resources. Contact information for the MERC Lending Library and for secondary support is on this slide. Lidibet Guzman is the secondary program director, and she can support you with coordinating transcripts, transfer of information from one site to another site or one state to another state, and more. Rhonda Isaacs is the program coordinator for the Lending Library. Finally, MDE has published 2 guidance documents that reference how you can support migratory children during distance learning, hybrid, or face-to-face learning. I am sure you are familiar with the image on the left from the guidance put out by MDE in August, revised in September. You'll notice that just below the English Learner section is a section regarding serving migrant students. Please review the section and let us know if you have any questions we can answer for you. Before we end this session, we would like to ask you to please add these 3 sessions to your schedule for more information about migratory children and families and what you can do to advocate for them. They will be offered on Friday, November 20th at the MELED conference. Thank you for attending our presentation today. If you have any questions or need any support around the needs of migratory children and families, please do not hesitate to contact Noemi Trevino or me, Julie Chi, at the contact information provided on this slide.